The first talk of the evening will be Stephen Bailey talking about Ayn Rand's novelette, Anthem.
How's everybody doing tonight? Great. Now, how many people here have read Atlas Shrugged? Quite a few. Now, how many have read Anthem? Almost complete coverage, but not quite. Anthem is not as well known, and it is a novelette. I have to ask, did you read any of these in Russian or in English?
No, I read everything in English. Okay. I got my mom to read Atlas Shrugged, but she read it in Russian.
Okay, good. So, obviously Anthem's not as well known. I actually look at this in my perspective as them being ideological bookends. And from the perspective of Atlas Shrugged, as we all know that have read the book anyway or saw the movie, covers how an advanced civilization declines back into the primitive based upon the ideas that they hold. Anthem, on the other hand, you can look at it as how does a primitive civilization get to experience a renaissance in the absence of having set up a Galt's Gulch like they did in Atlas Shrugged. So for me, Anthem has a special place in my heart because indirectly it was through Anthem that I discovered Ayn Rand. See, back in 1976, when many of you probably weren't yet born, well, some of us were, yes. There was a rock band called Rush, and their album 2112 came out that year, and that was back when they actually had albums, not CDs or MP3s. And the one side of the album was a rock opera, and in reading the lyrics of it several years later in my early 20s, I noticed Neil Peart gave homage to Ayn Rand. He acknowledged the genius of Ayn Rand, and when I read Anthem I understood why, because 2112 is an homage to the actual theme of Anthem. So it was through that I got my curiosity in reading the liner notes, reading the lyrics to the song, and I had to find out who this Ayn Rand was, who this guy was. I thought it was a guy at the time. I had no idea. So, in moving on on Anthem, I think what I want to draw attention to is I think that Anthem illustrates two key aspects of Ayn Rand. The first is the key theme of the novelette, which is the individual versus the collective. The second may not be so obvious to most people, but I think it demonstrates the importance of language, something that I think that Ayn Rand is unique in demonstrating through her writings, as fiction writings as well as her non-fiction writings. And so we'll talk about that second point first. So when you read Anthem, you'll be familiar with the fact that there are morally righteous people in the world that believe that they have the right to dictate to you what to do. And that shows up in banning certain words. And so we're not, in this case, we're not talking about a religious righteous moral group, but a secular righteous group, which is the government, the folks that run the society in Anthem. And they're not banning four-letter words. They're not banning the 7 words that George Carlin made famous that you cannot say on TV. What they're banning is a single-letter word, and its 2-letter derivative. And that is the word I, and the concept behind it, of course, the derivative is me. So how is it possible for an entire society to ban the concept of I? Well, first you permit no individual accomplishment, no individual work, no individual desires. No one is ever permitted to be alone. You eat with a collective, you work with a collective, you go to the shows or whatever the evening entertainment is as a collective. You're not allowed to ever be alone. And of course, most importantly, is that you need a society that is willing to disappear anyone who finds that magical word I and the concept that it means. They're never heard from again. So when you look at this from the language and concept formation perspective, which if you ever get a chance to read Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, I strongly recommend you read it. More importantly, if you have young kids that are either yours or you have influence over, have them read it. Young as far as high school or college age, very important. But that nonfiction book ties, as I'll talk about a little bit more closely, the importance of vocabulary to concept formation. In Atlas Shrugged, we're all familiar with how Rand shows the use of language, the abuse of it by the villains to evade, primarily to evade the consequences and the real meaning, the full meaning of the ideas that they hold, but also to deceive the rest of the population so that they also do not understand the true meaning of the ideas that they are promoting. In Anthem, language is used to control individuals in society. People cannot revolt if there's no conception of revolution. And if you cannot understand reality, what alternatives that are possible to you if your language is limited in such a way that you cannot possibly fully comprehend reality. So I'll read a key passage that is both from Anthem that demonstrates this specific concept or the association of the importance of language, as well as the key theme. Now, in Anthem, there are two key characters. The hero is, by a societal name, Equality 7-2521. And the heroine is, by the societal name, Liberty 5-3000. I will never use those names again because nobody can ever comprehend those. They take the names later on, late in the novel, of Gaia for her and Prometheus for him. So Gaia, this is after they escape society and they're finding their road back to initiate a renaissance. Of course, they don't call it that, but that's literally what it is. And Gaia says to Prometheus, "We love you." And then she frowned, and the frown was from frustration. And she said, "No, that is not what we wish to say. We are one, alone, and only, and we love you, who are one, alone, and only." So you see the significance of the missing concept of I here. She cannot say exactly what she means. Prometheus, through his narration of the novel, okay, says what he thinks for this. And he says, "We looked into each other's eyes, and we knew that the breath of a miracle had touched us and fled, and left us groping vainly. And we felt torn for some word we could not find." And this is exactly what Ayn Rand says in the Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, is that a concept cannot be completed until you have a word, which is the handle, the single entity that encapsulates that entire concept. Otherwise, all you have is a collection of attributes and the things that go into defining a concept, but those things will dissipate and disappear if you cannot associate a word with that concept. Very, very important. And you probably know this, so somebody does. Anthem, I think, was written in 1936, somewhere around.
Yeah, I don't remember the name. Somewhere.
But that's like 30 years before she wrote ITOE, right? Objectivist Epistemology. In Anthem, Rand also answers the ultimate question that we have. And she does this through Prometheus. Prometheus says, and of course the ultimate question that we all ask at one time or another, usually when we're younger, is what is the meaning of life, right? So Prometheus says, "I am the meaning. The value of reality is relative to the individual. It is the," going back to Prometheus now again, "it is my eyes which see, and the sight of my eyes grants beauty to the earth. It is my ears which hear, and the hearing of my ears gives it its song. It isn't the meaning of life, because there is no meaning to life abstract." That's my point, okay, not Prometheus now. Sorry, got to get the quotes in, end quote. So it's not the meaning of life in the abstract that's relevant. Life has meaning only within the context of whose life is it. And in Anthem, Rand gives that answer. The meaning of life is specific to Prometheus. Now, she provides a quick primer on morality and politics. Again, I'll quote some of the things from the book on morality. After Prometheus and Gaia escape to the forest, Prometheus anticipates John Gall, okay, channels him many years before she actually writes John Gall's speech to the world. when Prometheus says, "Let us forget their good and our evil." And so in Atlas Shrugged, Galt says, you condemn the consequences, essentially, of everything, all the ideas that you call the good, or you bemoan that, right? And not condemn it. And the reason for that is because everything that will lead to good in life, you have condemned as evil. So, again, she had these ideas very early in her life, and was bringing them out in the early mid-1930s. Prometheus says, "It is my mind which thinks, and the judgment of my mind is the only searchlight that can find the truth. Whatever road I take, the guiding star is within me, the guiding star and the lodestone which point the way. They point in one direction, they point to me." So it says, I am the motivation for everything that I do, and the determination of what is good, okay, is determined by what is good for me. For I know what happiness is possible to me on earth, and my happiness needs no higher aim to vindicate it. My happiness is not the means to any end, it is the end. It is its own goal and its own purpose. And the politics in a nutshell, I wish to find a warrant for being. I need no warrant for being, and no word of sanction upon my being. I am the warrant and the sanction. Neither am I the means to any ends others may wish to accomplish. I am not a tool for their use. I am not a servant of their needs. I am not a bandage for their wounds. I am not a sacrifice on their altars. So, Anthem contains all of these in a very short, concise statement. And this is one of the reasons why the Ayn Rand Institute sponsors an essay contest for 9th and 10th graders. You don't have to go through a 1,000-page book and understand all these complex ideas. In a very short novelette, you understand the individual versus the collective, and in a nutshell, like I said, the politics and morality behind that, or that derive from that. As I said, Anthem and Atlas Shrugged, I look at those as ideological bookends, and it's kind of strange that they're kind of written in the opposite order you would probably want to read as far as a story over time, because you want to end on the good note, right? The Renaissance, not on the decline of civilization. And Atlas shows the destruction of reason through language, and Anthem shows the importance of language to liberate the mind. And Atlas shows irrationality leads to collectivism, leads to the primitive, while Anthem shows that reason leads to individualism and civilization. So if you haven't read Anthem yet, I think now is a perfect time to do so. And if you do know any kids that are in 9th or 10th grade, suggest to them to enter the Anthem essay contest, and they can win some scholarship money for that. So that's the end of my portion. You want to introduce them?